All right, Jack, you ready to get started?
I am. Let's get it.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for making time for us today. I know you're busy, and I appreciate that you carved out time just for this conversation. I am Andrea Bishop. I direct the Center for Leadership and Development at Harding University. We have a master's degree, it's fully online in organizational leadership. We also offer an online 12 credit hour coaching certificate, and we have a minor in leadership and innovation for our undergraduates. I get to work with some of the best people in the world at Harding, and I get to work with Dr. Jack Schock, who is my guest today. The thing about Jack Schock and my relationship with him is that I've known him since I was 19, I think. And he still treats me the same today as he did then. And that's a good thing because he treated me like an adult at 19 and he
Mhm.
still does today. So, Jack, thank you so much for being
My
with us.
pleasure. Yeah,
And thank you for being such a great mentor and leader over the years.
that means a lot.
For those of you who don't know Jack, he is currently our assistant vice president. Is that right? For
Correct.
university communication and marketing here at Harding. He's also a distinguished professor in the communications department. Welcome, Jack. I'm
Thank
glad you're
you.
here.
Thank
Can we
you.
start with something fun?
Okay.
Okay, let's start with two truths and a lie.
Okay. I've written them down because I knew you were going to ask this.
Okay,
Okay.
yep,
So I just say it and then people guess. Is that how we're going to do this?
sure. Yep,
Yeah, or whatever. We'll see how it goes.
yep.
Okay, here are my two truths and a lie. I was the Hurricane Katrina spokesperson for the British Broadcasting Corporation, and I did live updates on Good Morning London from my bedroom in Cersei. Okay. On one weekend in 1996, I was the only person in Washington, D.C. who could authorize the signature of the President of the United States and therefore could declare war. Or three, I was the Valentine King in the fourth grade. And before
Wow.
any further, let's just get to the point.
Okay.
All those things are true about me. So I was trying to throw the Valentine King part in there as a stub, but I really was, and it was the best day of my life. You have to understand, my birthday is on Valentine's Day, and
That's
so
right.
it's a
Yes,
holy day for me. And
it
so
is a holy day. That's
be
absolutely
elected
right.
king in the fourth grade in Mrs. Benton's class.
Wow.
It's just been downhill since then.
That's right. That's right. That's absolutely right. Well, I am excited to hear some stories from you today.
Sure.
I We're going to talk about 9/11, absolutely. But before we get there, can you tell us about that role in the White House and maybe
Sure.
how that helped you get to the 9/11
Sure.
position?
Yeah. Okay. So Andrea has just illustrated my career long 39 years uh, philosophy objective of being a teacher. And that is you be nice to your students and they come back and they give you jobs and they ask you to do cool things. And both of those situations resulted in me, first of all, in 1995, getting a phone call from a former student and who said, "There's a job here at the White House, and you should come do it." And I was sitting on the sofa, putting on my tennis shoes, going to a baseball game, and all of a sudden, I said, "Well, of course I'll come do it." And no move or career long move toward that. Nobody knew who I was. It was a student who was sitting in the middle of a big meeting up there, and she said, "I've got our guy." And she called me that night. And I will give you a little glimpse into my personal family life. So I mustered up all my courage and I went home to tell my mother and daddy, who were in their, I guess, mid 70s at the time. I said, well, mama and daddy, um, I've been offered a job at the White House. And the very first thing my mother said was, well, you're not going to go, are you? Not because she had any political or philosophical difference, because my mama liked her chickens close. And Cersei was just a little bit too far from North Little Rock, where I grew up, and DC was way too far.
Yes.
So 2 weeks later, I had rented an apartment I'd never seen, packed up my house, rented it to friends, and drove a U-Haul to New York and was at the work in the White House the next day. Story number two is another student whose name is Darren Irby, and some of you may know Darren. He now his job is vice president for marketing for the American Red Cross, except he switched over um, to blood from crisis. And so during on the day that 9/11 happened, he was a vice president of communication for crisis communication. And so he was, I don't know if some of you were around to remember that day. You just remember how everybody was just reaching out. How can I help? What can I do? And I will feel forever blessed, lucky, um, that about 2 weeks later, uh, I got a phone call. This time I wasn't putting on my tennis shoes. I was at Silver Dollar City. Now, how about that? That is Jack Chalk in a nutshell. And I was at Silver Dollar City and I got this call, and it was Darren. He said, I need you. And what do you need? And he said, go to the Little Rock Airport. There'll be a plane ticket waiting for you, and just come up here. What eventually I learned was he and his close colleague were, as a result of this just crazy moment, had started a new leadership program, leadership, where they were pulling in professionals in the media relation communication field, who necessarily didn't have any. I had no Red Cross background except being a lifelong donor. Um, and so that's exactly what I did. I put down my funnel cake and I drove to the Little Rock Airport, and uh, I just sort of parachuted into the middle of the war zone.
Yeah.
Here in New York today, ironically, um,
Yes.
so I'm in my hotel room with you. I have family in Connecticut, so I'm headed up to Connecticut um, tomorrow. And the nice thing about not being in the classroom anymore is the flexibility of my days off.
Yeah.
So even though I've already had two phone calls with UCM this morning, I'm technically on vacation.
Well, I want to, first of all, thank you for that. It was
Sure.
good to see how you got from point A to point B. Um,
On both times,
yes,
on the backs of students who brought me along.
that,
I never get tired of telling that part of the story.
yes, absolutely. Yes. Well, I was one of those Americans who was sitting on the couch on 9/11 before we knew what 9/11 was,
Sure.
watching the morning news while I nursed my brand new baby.
Who's on
And
this cast right now, too, by the way.
yes, and I watched the break-in, like they broke into the news from New York, and I
Yes.
watched the first plane hit, and I can remember just sitting there and feeling overwhelmed, I guess is a good word for it, but also numb. Like it was just impossible to grasp. But then, Jack, I'm from Oklahoma.
Right.
Um, it immediately took me back to 1995
Yeah.
and that Oklahoma City bombing. And I kept thinking, as the numbers kept getting higher and higher and higher on the death count for 9/11, I kept thinking 186 people died in Oklahoma, and it just about broke us. Like
Yeah.
it was so bad,
So bad.
so bad. So tell us about that part of it. Where were
Okay.
you?
Pardon me.
Where were you?
I was at my house in Searcy, just like everybody else, watching TV, then went to school and had classes, and we watched it on television live. And I still hear from those students who were in Reynolds 202 with me that day. And it's nice to have a where were you moment, and especially for something so grim, but also something that ultimately provided a lot of solidarity. And that's what I still feel from that class that we were with that day in that room.
Yeah, that's
Two
very
weeks
good.
later, I had gotten the call, and fortunately, the university said, "Yes, please go, um, uh, come back, but please go." So
Yes.
I taught my classes. We didn't have this, of course, but we did have speakerphones. And so I never missed a class. And um, they would set the speakerphone up for me in the class, and we would just talk. And I told them about what I was doing, the people I was meeting, leadership issues that were suddenly thrust upon me in ways that I did not expect, problem solving, decision making. And then, number one, my immediate and most important job was I was the media relations director at the site at what they then called the pile. And I worked as hard as I could to get it changed from, I just thought the pile was disrespectful. It's a grave site. I never got anywhere with that. Whatever, it was still called the pile all the way through. The day that I arrived, it took three cranes doing like this to this to this to this to get they were removing debris, of course, had started that. And it was still in the discovery phase to try to see if there were any survivors. This was 2 weeks in. So most people knew that it was but there were there was not any chance at all for anybody to survive. But I worked with a dear group of firefighters who had not been home since it happened. And I still have the fondest place in my heart for those firefighters. You can put that slide up now, Andrea. This morning I went out to get a bagel and a cup of coffee before we were doing this. And I passed the door to this firehouse, which is on the corner of 8th Avenue and about 50th Street, something like that. And um, this is the firehouse, and it's 2 blocks from me right now. And this is the firehouse that lost every single person on the shift. And so um, I've worked with this firehouse and the guys in it for years. Of course, they're all now retired from the original. But I wanted to show this because I wanted to tell you this story. And some of you know that every year I bring a group of students to New York City. Um, and one of the things that we do is we have a little 9/11 uh, day. And so many of them were not born on that day. And so everything they've learned from 9/11, or they know, I should say, about 9/11, someone has told them.
Right.
And so my focus on that when I bring people here now is to say, you only know about this what somebody's told you. And that is so important when you're talking about making decisions about being the first responder or the first record of history, which we considered ourselves, um, is to make sure the story was right and um, because it'll be there forever. The one last story about that firehouse just up the road. I was here now 4 years ago for the 20th anniversary of the of 9/11, and we're coming up on the 25th next year. And so there's already lots of talk about what's going to be unbelievably the 25th year anniversary of that event. But I was here with a group of senior communication majors, and so I took them up to the firehouse, um, and I said, just knock on the door. It was in the door was closed, obviously, and I said, I ran to the corner and I bought a bunch of flowers from the deli. And I just put it, I gave a student those flowers and I said, go up and knock on the door and tell the firefighter that you want to add your flowers to the memorial because I knew they had a memorial on the inside. So there's a little bit of insider trading on that. But she walked right up to that door, knocked on it. They could not have been more nice. Invited us all in, probably a dozen of us. Let us try on their fire coats and hats and sit on the truck. And we were the first group um, that they had allowed into that firehouse in 20 years.
Wow.
And it could not have been. I texted my colleagues this morning in that photo and I said, I've been bringing people to New York for 40 years, and this is the top moment of my
Mm.
career. And again, I don't know how we're going to tie that into leadership other than what I consider my role as leadership for 19-year-olds is to encourage them to knock on the door.
I love that.
Just
Yes.
knock on the door, and they were terrified. And on the other side of the door was a room full of guys that we would see every single day at church or at the grocery store. And we did a complete documentary about those firemen inside that house. So I guess I don't know if this is very uh, um, organized, but that was a moment of leadership that I'd really try to impart on the students and just say, just knock on the door.
That's
Courage,
it.
confidence
Yes.
to
Great.
year-olds who don't have a lot of either.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so
Good.
I don't want to get too bogged down in that, but that just happened this morning, and that was a good moment for me.
That was a good moment. And it reminds me of something else that you told me about one time when you worked in the White House.
Mhm.
I know it's not a 9/11 story, but it's still a good one. Tell us about the person who invited you to Walmart.
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, so my you got to understand in 1995 when I went, which is now 29 years ago, and it was, of course, was during the first Clinton administration, and so Arkansans were. It was cool to be an Arkansan. We had our White House badges, and we had secret little uh, appliques or stickers or whatever if you were from Arkansas. And because I can't go back and forth with you, I'll just tell you it was a slice of watermelon from Hope, Arkansas, a little tiny thing that just said, I'm in the cool kids club, you know?
Yeah.
That was nice. So my director was an Arkansan as well. The first day that I get there, she came to my office and she didn't say, here are your jobs, here are the things you got to do, this is what you got to do, and don't mess up. You know, I was already terrified. She came to my office and she said, My name is Jamie Shell Williams, and I'm from Arkadelphia, and I went to Washita, and I know exactly who you are. And at the end of the day today, I'm going to show you where the Walmart is. And that has become a defining moment for me as well, especially when I have a new colleague or somebody, because, working at Harding, a newbie comes in and then they just sort of get their pencil and their overhead projector, metaphorically, and off they go. I really work hard, especially people for whom I'm a leader of some sort, to find and say something like, I'm going to show you where Walmart is. That's that really happened, but it's a great metaphor for me because that happened to me and it formed a bond with my leader, my director. Of course, it didn't help that we were Arkansas co-conspirators, but it didn't hurt, I should say. But still, from that moment, I felt a bond with my director that helped us get through some really tough times. And I hadn't been there 3 hours when that happened on the very first day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love
I
that story.
encourage everybody every time I talk to a group like this or talk to students for their future life is keeping in mind that when somebody is new, it doesn't matter if you're at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue or at Wendy's. Those first day, first week people are nervous and scared and want to do well. And that's the first step.
Yes, that's so good. One of um, one of the leadership qualities that I really like to spend some time on with students is intentionality and kindness, and sort of how those
Yeah.
two qualities make the most impactful leaders. So I don't have a story in mind. I'm hoping one comes to mind. An example of kindness, perhaps, that you witnessed
Yeah.
either as a leader or as a follower.
Let's go to 9/11 for that one because that's the obvious choice, surrounded by death and destruction and um, visuals that stay with me now for 23 and a half years are still with me. I've got a pretty healthy case of PTSD plus a piece of the Trade Center debris in my lung,
Mm.
but I'm in good shape. And um, thanks to great health care, um, I, I, I'm well taken care of and um, I'm in good shape. Um, so my job, again, I use the term parachuted in. And so I think I must be getting some sort of a reputation for that because with my parachute into my current job at UCM, where I sort of parachuted in. Um, I guess my leadership skills have been tested and refined by fire, but I directed all of the media coming into wanting coverage at Ground Zero. Let me tell you what that was like. It was still considered a crime scene, and the FBI guy I worked with shook his finger in my face and said, "You can't so much as lean over and pick up your pencil if you drop it, or you might get shot." And I said, got it. If I drop a pencil, I'm just going to let it go and get a new pencil. So it was serious business, as you can understand. And so I directed um, without any training, just relying on common sense, courage, confidence. Um, I just went in, and Darren knew I could do that, which is why he asked me. And so I immediately began to be the touch point for everybody who wanted a story out of Ground Zero in those days. Um, there were serious boundaries that nobody could cross. You couldn't get anywhere close. The streets were all still closed. We were driving on the sidewalks. So it was very primitive and very just as you just as you can imagine. I don't have to describe that. Um, so I was there on the day that the official status be- moved from rescue to salvage. And there was that day when whoever was making the decisions said the recovery part is over. And now it's just salvage. And that meant that the debris, as they called it, was scooped up into trucks, taken away to be analyzed and handled, whatever. That wasn't my job. But on that day, I was in our dining facility. And if you, well, I've never seen a room full of firefighters with their head in their hands crying. And so our tactic on that was to not say, "How are you?" Because obviously they're terrible. And uh, we were trained and we developed a method of saying, "Tell me about your friend," and sort of gauging and testing the waters with that. It's how much they needed, wanted. We had spiritual advisors and mental health advisors, dozens of them. But my job was to keep those rescue workers, firefighters, and everybody who was eventually there, maybe 1,000 on any given day, to anticipate their needs and know what today was going to be from a briefing in the morning, and then talk to all the people who were working for me to say, um, here are our bullet points for the day. No matter what, anybody asks you, like I remember, I don't remember what network it was, but somebody called one morning and they wanted to talk to a mother who had left her children at home to come work on the rescue. And so if you're a reporter, you can't just walk in there. So it was my job to, at that day, to find a female, a mother who had not been home in 2 weeks. And would you like to talk to ABC or Fox or whoever it was? I don't remember. History Channel. It was History Channel. And then sort of, you can't just stand in the front of the room and, like a order at a restaurant, say, "I need a mom with kids who hadn't been home." Um, that requires discretion and compassion. And that is the day that I remember my colleagues and I felt like we had moved into that care. Before that, it had been keep everybody in chapstick and eye drops and gloves and boots and meet their physical needs because they're going back out there to try to find their buddies. And then that was the day when the entire mood flopped.
Mm.
And that was the day that I realized that the human touch on this was what would ultimately save us all. Not that I invented that. I did not invent on that. I just called on that, which I knew from my faith background. By that time, I'd been a teacher for 20 years or however long. And you just rely on those resources that you've built up.
Mm. That's good. Thank you so much. So you've talked about, like, I'm trying not to get emotional. You're making me
Okay.
emotional.
Sorry.
Um, no, it's wonderful. I appreciate, I mean, I don't want to be emotional, but
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
telling powerful stories. So thank you for that. So the next question that I have is, how do you keep going
Yeah.
when things are difficult like that? I mean, how do you keep doing it as a leader?
Well, first of all, um, it is my hope and my blessing that nobody listening to this will ever have to do. I mean, White House was cool and fun, and there were some really bad days. I don't remember those. I just remember the cool stuff. I
Right.
remember the day I left. You'll love this touch. The day I left, in my going away party in the middle of the White House, we had Velveeta and Rotel cheese down,
It's
like Andrew Jackson's urns or somebody like that. And my staff came marching in there and said, "You're home again," basically,
yeah.
because I hadn't
Yeah.
seen any Velveeta or good barbecue in a year. You
That's
know,
right.
see,
Yes.
they'll tell you they have good barbecue, but they don't. How do you keep going? It's all a matter of relationships for me. You can't go it alone. Like Jamie Shale Williams from Who Went to Washita. Um, every day after that, when it on the days that it got grim or tough or we were getting yelled at or whatever, you just kind of go in there and say, have you ever been to the Dixie Castle in Paragould, or wherever? And my buddy taught me how to do that because his his saying, he called me one time and he was under a table in a hurricane shelter in Puerto Rico. And he said, "What's your favorite Tootsie Pop?" And I said, "Well, grape, obviously. What's yours?" And he said, "Strawberry." And we talked about Tootsie Pops for a minute. And then he hung the phone up and he literally was under a table in a hurricane. And so the importance of building the relationships, obviously for work, um, output and quality, and getting the work done. Um, that's what gets you through the hard times. My team and I have reunited at the 10th anniversary, the 20th anniversary, and we're already planning our 25th anniversary reunion. I'm still in touch with those guys every single day. Nobody will ever know.
Mm.
At the 10th anniversary, we were walking down the street, and my dear friend Dana, uh, who went through it with us as well, she's now a corporate communicator for Girl Scouts. But we were walking down the street in New York, and it was 10th anniversary, and they were um, lots of things going on. And we were walking down the sidewalk, and there was a TV on in a window showing some footage from that day. And this is crude. Uh, Dana just vomited on the sidewalk. And she said, "I am so sorry. This is still my gut reaction every time I see those buildings go down."
Mm.
And so, there were 8 or 10 of us right there. And on that sidewalk, um, there was that moment 10 years later that had gotten its start um, in a hotel room or a conference room or something where we were team building, so that we could rely on each other. No need to talk about it. I Every September 11th, we just exchange texts, and they don't even say anything. Um, and that's just a war story that we could go on forever on that. But I can't get away from the fact that I learned what I think are exceptional leadership skills in the area of building relationships because you know not everybody goes to work to make friends, and I get that. But why would you ever want to be in a work situation that's not fun or joyous or happy? Um, I try to lead with that every time. I want. There's a reason they call it work. It's work, but it doesn't mean that even in the most grim times that you can't have your moment with your people and rally. And you can't have that moment unless you've pre-made that moment. So I've spent a lifetime in crisis public relations, and that maybe doesn't affect you. But the day that you go into that new person's office and say, I'm going to show you where Walmart is on the very first day, you're on your way.
I love that. Thank you. So with our graduate degree, one of the things that our students hear over and over and over, because I say it so often, is that leadership and communication are they're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
You can't pull them apart. So if you see a good leader, there's definitely going to be good communication there. And of course, the opposite is too. Bad leaders, bad communicators. So can you speak to that?
Sure. Sure. I can. Are you kidding? That's just what I grew up on. Um, uh, and doctor, heal yourself on this. There are areas in this which I am not very good, and I still drop the ball. Um, but now, what were you saying? I can't remember. I got distracted.
Leadership and communication are two sides.
Communication, of course.
Yeah.
That's why everybody should be a communication major.
Yeah.
Okay, finish. Um,
Yes.
yeah, but learning to differentiate um, with a sort of a fancy word, audiences. Like in my current job, I deal with internal people. That's professors and students and staff and administrators and stakeholders, um, board members, um, and there's an external audience, which is the guy who called me 3 days after President Carter had died, and somebody on um, making those decisions on our campus hadn't read that the federal mandate that flags be at half staff. So he was very upset about that. And he found his way to me and through the president's office. And, it was my job to talk him down from that idea because it was a simple mistake. Our university is not in the habit of ignoring federal flag mandates, but I knew he didn't want to hear from me that it was just an oversight. So I let him rant for a little bit, and you can always listen for because people will tell you every single time what they really want, you know. And if you can just kind of lean in, sometimes in my brain I have this imaginary um, neon sign that says "Shut up." Listen, do not talk at this moment, because my tendency is to jump in, um, try to solve the problem. Um, uh, but sometimes you just have to listen. And we try in the comm department, to develop those skill sets of can you write, can you shoot, can you edit, can you photograph, can you listen? Because in our context with what we're talking about right now, um, he my immediate answer was they're all up today or down rather. They're
Right.
all they have moved today. But that's not what he wanted. He wanted to make sure he wasn't even a um, stakeholder. He was somebody who was driving by, and but it would not have. I would not have represented the university well by just saying, "Thank you for calling. The flags are at half staff. Goodbye." You know, I wanted to see what else was rolling around in there, and it turns out that he was actually grieving for President Carter. And but that's how it manifested. And so, then I just tried to, after listening, and it's hard sometimes when people are ranting like that. Um, Customer service is no vacation Bible school, let me tell you. And so what I learned from that was he really just was sad about Jimmy Carter dying. And I said, sounds like President Carter was important to you. And then that's all you have to say, you
Mm.
know? And I don't know, how can we call that leadership in terms of being not passive aggressive or um, me pandering to him? I and I don't feel like I was pandering to him because I knew that he wanted to tell me about his relationship, his respect for Jimmy Carter. So we talked for 3 or 4 minutes about that, and then he said, "Can you promise me that those flags are come down? Will come down?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I can."
Mm.
And um, the end of that story is somebody messed up again about 3 days later, but we're not going to call Larry and tell him about that. If he drives back by, he has my number in more ways than one. So,
That's good. That's
so
good.
yeah, that concept, people don't often think of listening as a communication skill because they think we're always talking or writing or making a website or something like that. But it's listening.
That's good. I think we've probably got time for one more question or short story.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so
Is there a chat here? Are people asking me things in this? Because
I
oh, I
don't
think
know.
they're just names. Hey, everybody, those of you whom I see, hi, Mike, um, and Zach, and uh, everybody. Kathy, hey, Kathy. Anyway, I'm not going to look at that because I'm just going to distract.
You're gonna get distracted. Yeah. Um, so I think, well, definitely every leader is different. We all have our different strengths. We have to know our weaknesses.
Yeah.
And I think the more opportunities we have to develop those strengths and improve our weaknesses, obviously we're going to get stronger.
Mhm.
I know what my strengths are. Tell me what you learned about your strengths throughout these two pretty big events in your life.
I really would rather tell you about my weaknesses
You can
because
start with
that's
your
what I
weakness,
still
but I
struggle
want to
with.
know what your strength is too.
Okay, well, maybe we'll get there, but my weakness is still I want everybody to be all right.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's misinterpreted to, you're all right, aren't you? And I struggle with that right now because I, again, work in an office that's very demanding and there are lots of demands made on the staffers who work in my office. Personnel issues, 2 people have resigned since I've been here. That is not my strong point. I'm working on it. Um, I just want everybody to be okay. And sometimes I gloss over, and I'm trying really hard to climb down off the mountain and check on what's going on there. And I just can't overemphasize how hard that is for me.
Mm.
It's really hard for me sometimes to get personally into the weeds. I talk a big show about listening and all that, but it's something I have to work on. Like I told you with my imaginary neon sign in my brain that says, don't talk right now, just listen.
Yeah. Yes.
I guess I'll tell you a strength or two, although I'm bashful about it. I'm flexible. I'm funny. I'm nice. I read people really well. I pride myself in knowing the person that I need to win over. I don't want to talk about that anymore. That's
Okay, well, I'll talk
blush.
about me. I'm going to talk about me and give you a break just a second.
Okay.
So, well, first of all, I'm going to sort of talk about you. To our audience, the first time I met Jack was when I was a freshman at Harding, so
Yeah.
young girl. And through that time as a student, obviously came to love and respect him very much. And in my senior year, I was about to graduate, and I had just reached this point where I didn't know what I wanted to do next. I did not know. And I was sitting in one of Jack's classes. By the way, everybody was telling me what we should do. Like, you should do this. You should do this. You're great at this, whatever. And I stayed after class and talked to Jack. one day, and what you told me, you probably don't remember this at all, but you said you're going to get a job, and a first job is a first job, and that's all it has to be. And then you're going to probably get another job, and you're going to figure it out. And that was amazing. And it also was true because, yes, you figure it out as you go along. And the more experiences we have, the richer our, more full our toolkits are. And so it was not until I was in my 40s that I figured out I'm really good at building things. Like, I'm really good at building things. I can do that really well. There are other things I can't do, but I can do that. What have you learned about yourself like that?
Okay, I'll tell you exactly. I've had a minute to think about it. First of all, I have uh, a professional, a mental health professional therapist who I got to tell you, there's nothing like a paid friend. And I love to go in there, Dr. Nancy. And one thing, I can say whatever I want, and I know that I'm not the craziest person she's seen that day. That gives me some comfort because I can lay it on whatever's in there, and she doesn't even blink. She told me about myself, and it was this huge aha moment that I love to start things, but I don't like to finish things. And when she said that, I just had this moment, and she said, I have some mental clarity for the first time in my entire adult life because that is exactly true. And so I don't, for me personally, I have a hard time um, with that concept of carrying things through to the end because that's just not what I do. And she said, let's focus on the fact that you start things better than anybody else. Now, this is my paid friend, so she has to say that. You start things better than anybody else, but there is a world full of people who can only finish what other people let them see or let them dream about. And so she gave me permission to be the dreamer, the starter, the ignition. And then again, it all came together, building on this relationship business that you built with people on the very first day. Then I've learned to entrust carrying it out to other people because I had gotten so frustrated because one of my bosses one time sort of gave me a hint of that. And he said, you need to do your own job instead of doing everybody else's job. My not nice White House boss said that to me. And I said, yes, I understand that. But as their director, I feel like helping them do their job is doing my job. So I've had a really career long struggle with it being okay and to know my limits and to say, we're going to build this website and it's going to be great, but you're going to do it because I just feel like that, but I'm
Yeah,
not that. I can't build a website. I can't take a photo like Jeff Montgomery can.
right.
Um, and it's okay uh, because I have the ideas, and that is really hard for me to talk about because it sounds boastful, which is part of my problem. Um, my therapist was a Baptist from Pine Bluff, so she should have known this. Um, but I was telling her about the joy bus. And if you're a Church of Christer from a certain age, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Jesus, others, yourself. And I said, I just feel like I'm constantly on this joy bus trying to take care of other people. And she said, I'm going to give you permission to change that acronym as you need it. And that's the JYO. Jesus, yourself, and then others. So I
Nice.
share my 10 years of experience with Dr. Nancy and say, I give you permission to be Jesus, yourself, and then others. Um, or self-care or whatever the fancy words are for it now. And don't dwell around in that guilt because you need to dwell around in the positive.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
felt like I really got a sermon in on that. You didn't
You
ask for.
did. Yeah, you did. To our audience, we only have a few minutes left. If you've got a question or a comment for Jack, we would love for you to put that in the comment section. And while you are doing that, while you're thinking about that, um, we'll come back to your question in just a second. I want to make sure that I plug um, next month's webinar. So in February, we're going to talk about what we can learn about motivation and responsibility from true crime. And I'm really excited about it. It's going to be great. So you can scan that QR code on your screen. You can also always email me with any questions that you might have. I'll put this back up in a minute. Jack, let's look at the chat.
Okay, I see that, Kathy. Thank you. I knew we were simpatico on that. And I'll give you another example while we're landing the plane. Um, I learned at the White House um, that my strength was checking my desk, seeing what the next most important thing to do was, and doing that. And then I began to thrive on that for good or for bad. And I've let that be a part of who I am. And I've learned to lean into it and not fight it. Um, and when I have really unsettled days, like the other day, somebody asked me to give them a snapshot of what our fiscal year 27 budget was going to be. I said, oh my goodness, I'd rather pour a sidewalk than do that because I got to get through January the 29th today and solve all, put out all the fires. So
Right, right.
know that about myself, and I know that I should lean into it and use that as my strength and not let the weakness part of it overcome. Because um, yesterday we had a pretty big crisis in our office, and um, I I just sent a group text to 5 people and I said, somebody find this person, somebody find this person, somebody find this person. Had to do with some press coverage that we did not want. Um, and one of the staff people in my office, on my team, as we say now, said, I just got out of my night class and I'm just catching up on this chat, but I'm so proud and thankful to be a part of this team. You guys are rock stars. And that means a lot to me because I didn't sit here in my hotel room and absorb it all and try to change it. I let them be a part of that. Um, a media outlet broke some copyright guidelines about something we had done, and had a lawyer on me, and I mean it was really big time stuff. I can save that for another time, but at the end of the night last night, the problem got solved. The fire gets put out, but I felt like I had made great strides with these wonderful people who work up there just by letting them be in on the problem
Yeah,
solving.
yeah, yes. Let's look at this one by Kevin Atkinson. What is one
Hi,
leadership
Kevin.
or communication skill you saw well that implemented by Bill Clinton?
Mm. Well, first of all, um, I've seen him in a lot of situations. And to be clear, he has aides. He had a diarist. And so part of my job as the leader of the communication response for that was to make sure he knew everybody he was going to be talking to. In my field, I'm never going to be Moses. For those of you who might understand that metaphor, I'm always going to be Aaron. And I tell all my young ones that if you want to be Moses, that's great. Moses doesn't often come from our camp, you know. We are the Aarons of the world. Aaron is our patron saint. I slash we believe that Aaron is the one who actually wrote the words, "Let my people go." But we won't solve that until we get to talk to him in heaven someday. And so, yeah, um, that idea of knowing in advance, and the President of the United States has the luxury of a full team of people who say, "This person's sitting right here. This person's sitting right here." And he's going to disagree with you, and she's going to agree with you. But I took my family into the Oval Office one day to say hello. We were allowed to do that one time a year. And so my brother and my sister-in-law and my niece and nephew came up. And so it was my job to introduce them. And he's cold, completely doesn't know who anybody is. But it's my job to say, this is my nephew, Jacob, and he goes to CAC. And I knew that that trigger point on CAC, he was off.
Hmm.
And um, and it just you do that. I'll tell you who else did that one time. Again with my nephew, Dr. Gaines. When he was president, I took my nephew to meet him. Actually, I guess he was chancellor. And I said, "Here's my nephew, Jacob. He wants to be a history major." So if you're ever in a situation like that, and that's how President Clinton would be. Some of you know our late departed dear friend Alice Ann Keller. She and her husband Wayne used to come see me a lot, and I took them one time to a helicopter um,
Jack, we've got
departure.
1 minute. So
Okay.
sorry.
And they had a
Yeah.
big rope line, and the president walked down the rope line, shook hands with everybody. Al Sands said, "I live across the street from John Paul Capps, who was a big Democrat legislator at the time." And Bill Clinton said, "Well, how is he?" And Al Sands Keller said, "Well, I guess he's okay." And Bill Clinton, the president of the United States, said, "Well, I just talked to him this morning. Was having open heart surgery at 9. Have you heard from him?" And Al Sands said, "No." So those networks, anybody can do that, but um, you got to lean into that. And that's his strength. A
Thank you.
natural ability to do that, also
Yeah.
surrounded by good errands.
Okay, I'm
I
going to
could
put this
do all
up
that.
one more time. I'm going to say thank you, thank you, thank
Thank
you
you.
to Dr. Jack Shock for joining us today, and for all of you for sitting with us and hearing some stories. I hope that you're walking away with something new to think about.
So
Hopefully, we'll see you next month and have a great, wonderful day.
so easy to find. Call me up.
Bye.